Here is George making its way into Cuba, the eastern portion of the island, after leaving Puerto Rico and Hispaniola, and at least killing at least 30 people in the last day or so. A very slow-moving storm that is still rather strong, right at the border of hurricane strength, but could gather more strength if it gets back out over the open waters, and there's that possibility there over the next few days. Also in the Atlantic, two other hurricanes and a tropical depression number 11, plus hurricanes Ivan and Jeanne. So active weather taking place into the Atlantic, pretty quiet into much of the United States thanks to a strong via the satellite. You can see the storm pushing offshore with other areas of convection and clouds into the Atlantic Ocean, and that swirl slowly taking its way towards the west-northwest across the warm waters of the Atlantic. Looking back at the
turbulent weather abounds tonight in the warm waters of the Atlantic. There is one tropical storm and 3 hurricanes. But right now, George is the only one that threatens the U.S. mainland. Good morning. Welcome to Weather Center. I'm Sharon Rizalton. We are closely monitoring Hurricane George. For a complete update on it, we turn now to Jeff Morrow in the Forecast Center.
All right, thanks, Sharon. And indeed, George still slowly plodding along through the southeastern parts of Cuba. The center of circulation still over land, and that is the best news we can give you at this point, because as long as that center stays over land, then we won't have a further developing hurricane. Right now, the hurricane at 75 miles per hour, a minimal hurricane. Hurricane George, as of the 11 p.m. advisory, we'll be getting a new advisory within the next hour from the Hurricane Center, but as of this time, 20.6 north, 75.7 west. We're about 460 miles southeast of Miami, winds at 75, and the movement west-northwest at 12, that had slowed somewhat in the last 24 hours, and the pressure estimated to be around 992 millibars. Now, there are hurricane warnings still up for the eastern parts of Cuba, Haiti, the central Bahamas, southeastern Bahamas, and the Turks and Caicos Islands, and the watches are up for the northwestern Bahamas, west central Cuba, and for all of South Florida, from Deerfield Beach down along the Gold Coast, including the Hollywood, Florida area, Miami Beach, all the way through the Keys and up the west coast to Bonita Beach, Florida, almost to Fort Myers. Let's show you what they were doing in and around the Miami area today. And again, it was basically an evacuation problem for the people coming up out of the Keys, but for everybody else, well, they were stocking up on supplies, spending the day boarding up their homes, and generally preparing for Hurricane George, which is expected to start to affect South Florida as we head on through the day on Thursday. Joining me now here in the Forecast Center is Meteorology Supervisor Stu Ostro. And Stu, at this time of the night when we're looking at these infrared satellite pictures, it's doubly hard to try to find out where that center is, but we still think it's over land at this point.
It is hard to find the exact center of circulation. It is pretty broad, but we do think that for the most part it's still over land. All
right, and here is that satellite perspective. And we did want to mention to folks that we are not getting new satellite images at the present time because of an expected phenomenon known as an eclipse. Where the satellite gets between the sun and the earth, and we can't get any new pictures. But at this point, this is about 2 hours or so old, but at this point the general center was about right in here. Is that right, Stu?
It was, and we have every reason to believe that it's probably just spiraling along pretty much in the same direction that it's been going. In fact, although there have been a couple wobbles back and forth, you could draw the line all the way back to the east or east-southeast, and that's the track that it's followed right since it formed, to the west or west-northwest. And that general motion should continue at least for some time to come. Eventually it may hook a little bit more to the north, but at least in the short term the center is staying over land, and that's preventing any intensification.
Still, even looking at this particular satellite vantage point, we still have plenty of oranges and reds, so there must be torrential rains falling, particularly here on the eastern tip of Cuba, which could lead to some more big flooding problems or even mudslides.
That's why we're always a little hesitant to call something a minimal hurricane, because even they can cause a lot of problems, not only with the wind and storm surge, which is not nearly as bad as, say, a Category 3 or 4 hurricane, but still we see these very heavy squalls, torrential downpours, threat of mudslides, and flash flooding, and there are hurricane force winds in some of those squalls.
All right, and the death toll, at least as we have it so far, about 110 people so far, 70 of those in the Dominican Republic alone. Other areas that were affected, the U.S. Virgin Islands, where 2 people are missing, and several others were injured. There is widespread damage to hotels, shops, and homes, and at least 55 boats have reportedly been sunk there in the Virgin Islands during the storm. Also, Puerto Rico, where at least 3 people were killed as a direct result of this hurricane. Virtually the entire island was without electricity. Most residents are still without water service. The damage in Puerto Rico has been estimated at least $1 billion. So this has just been a horrendous hurricane as it's moved through the Caribbean, Stu. Fortunately, I guess so far, at least as it's moved up across Cuba, it has weakened.
It has, but people ought not to let their guard down. We're glad that the preparations in South Florida have gone basically smoothly so far. Emergency management folks have done a great job, and anybody who might be getting to bed a little late will want to get up a little early in the morning because some of those watches at least could be changed to hurricane warnings.
All right, and quickly, we think it will start affecting South Florida, at least some of the outer rain squalls, maybe sometime during the day on Thursday.
Yeah, later Thursday, maybe picking up overnight Thursday.
All right, thanks, Stu Ostro, meteorology supervisor. Stu and I will be back in another half hour with the very latest on Hurricane George. But you can always get the latest if you're away from your television on our online service at weather.com. Right now, let's go back to Sharon Resultant in the studio. She has a look at some of the rest of the nation's weather and a quick peek at your forecast.
Thanks, Jeff and Stu. Let's go ahead and look at the lower 48, and you can see a huge area of high pressure affecting you across the northeast, all the way down into portions of the southeast where temperatures have cooled slightly. Still watching some rain into the upper Midwest ahead of this front. Behind this front, some cooler air, and things are already cooling down into the northern plain states. It's not bad out to the west either. Temperatures are actually very comfortable around Salt Lake City, 73 degrees, 76 in Seattle, a little warm around Portland this hour, and as you head down into portions of Southern California into the lower 70s at this time. Actually, those were the highs. These are the current temperatures now into the 60s, and much more comfortable into Pacific Northwest with some 60s also around Seattle and Portland. There's a closer inspection around Redmond, 59, and Salem checking in with 67. We go down the coast, 62 in San Francisco, 61 in Monterey, and temperatures into Southern California into the low and mid 60s, and even a few upper 60s. So obviously not faring too badly here. Few earthquakes to report, lots of them actually as we head on into central areas of the state. Most of these, as you can see, well under 3 on the Richter scale. Let's see if I can pinpoint a couple of them for you. And we had one, for instance, 2.4, not far from Bishop, around Stovepipe Wells. Right there on the edge of the map, around 2.1, so nothing too terribly strong here. Nothing heading into the northwest, and one stronger one up into Alaska, and that one measuring just over 3.2 near Anchor Point. Well, with that said, let's go back to the lower 48. Check out the latest in your weather, and probably the one thing that really stands out is this. That's what we're looking at this point as we check things out. And you can see, obviously, that we're talking about some pretty wet weather entering the picture around Madison, stretching on into Milwaukee, and there could be some brief heavier showers embedded with that as well. There's a look at the current temperatures, really cooling down into the northeast, and also heading into areas like Chicago, 56 degrees, 53, in and around the Twin Cities. Your rain has ended. And it gets even cooler as you head up toward International Falls, nicknamed the icebox of the nation. And that's one of the cooler spots tonight. Also cool into the northeast, watching for the potential for some frost.
watch tonight is all about the tropics. 3 hurricanes and 1 tropical storm in the Atlantic Basin alone. What you're looking at right here, the swirl of Hurricane George. This is the hurricane that is responsible for over 100 deaths in the Northeast Caribbean just over the last 3 days. It is now moving over eastern Cuba, bringing some torrential rains here to eastern Cuba, now into central Cuba. Battering waves here, strong tropical moisture feed in here. Well, it's all tropical, of course. And here's the center of it, somewhere in here, a very broad area of low pressure. Santiago, Chile, on the southeast coast of Santiago, Cuba, that is, gusting to 60 knots at last check. That is 69 miles per hour. Hurricane George leads off our tropical update this hour. These are some of the other systems we'll have a look at. 1 hurricane, 2 hurricanes, 3 hurricanes, and 1 tropical storm. Let's get the latest on Hurricane George, however. This is the trek it's made all the way across the Atlantic Ocean. It was named last Wednesday, so 8 days ago. It became a tropical storm out here near the Cape Verde Islands and has just made a beeline west-northwest, moving through St. Kitts and some of these other Northeast Caribbean islands, then through Puerto Rico, then yesterday through Haiti and Dominican Republic, and then tonight the center is right in here. Now here we are in Florida. Lots of folks are very concerned. We've got a lot of viewers in Florida, even at this late hour here tonight. Very concerned because hurricane watches have now been issued for the 4 counties of extreme South Florida. That's Dade and Broward County. There's over 3 million people right there. And also in Collier County of Southwest Florida, Naples, for example, Bonita Beach, and Monroe County, which includes all of the Keys, which have been evacuated. We're keeping a close eye on this one. Boy, you got to. Hurricane George. The reason why it's not stronger than it is, or why you can't even see an eye, is because the center of the circulation is over land. But in some of these rain bands spiraling in toward the hurricane center, tremendous rain, and as I said, right here in Santiago, 70-mile-per-hour wind gusts. So Cuba is taking a real hit here tonight. Not raining in Havana yet, but it will get rainy and windy later on tonight. And here in Florida, well, we just have clear skies right now in the city of Miami. But as we take a close look at this satellite picture, and I just stepped to the wrong side of the frame, you can see some of the high, thin cirrus clouds, the outflow at 7, 8, 10 miles up in the atmosphere out ahead of this thing. So when you wake up in the morning here in Miami, there'll be sunshine. Same story, Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, and over Alligator Alley toward Naples. There will be high, thin clouds work in during the day, and then Thursday night the weather may go downhill, showery and squally, especially in the Keys. This is the strike possibility of the hurricane. As you can see, it's very broad from the east coast of Florida to the west coast of Florida, and even out into the central Gulf of Mexico. We'll keep you posted. Check with us here on Thursday. We'll have more to go on. Tropical storm Karl gave us a blast of wind here in Bermuda. That's moving away from the U.S. Hurricane Ivan is moving north and weakening, and we're keeping a close eye on Jeanne as that moves off the coast of Africa. That is heading toward the Americas, but it's a long way away. The latest on George next.
Make your dreams a reality. Reach out for positive energy. You feel the power when you take control. If you want it all you've got to do is pick it up. Get it on with the psychic solution.
Hi, I'm Tammy, and as you can see, my life is great now. But when my friends ask, I admit that I didn't do it alone. I tried for years and never could find the answers by myself. But now I do have it all. And it all started with that first free psychic reading. I'm proof that one free call can really change your life. Believe me, good luck is waiting for you, and so is love. But you gotta reach out and take it. Hey, what if I had never tried that first free reading? Without my psychic, this would all still be a dream. So don't just dream of a better life, do something about it. Call right now.
Don't wait any longer to change.
Thanks for joining us for this edition of Weather Center. I'm Sharon Resultin. A lot to talk about as we head on into the tropics. We actually have 3 hurricanes out into the Atlantic and 1 tropical storm, but one hurricane that you are most likely familiar with, and that is George, as it has been leaving a path of damage ever since it moved through the Leeward Islands, crossed through the northeastern Caribbean, and is now affecting portions of Cuba. Let's go ahead and look at the latest coordinates now with George, and many of you I know are plotting at home. What's kind of interesting to note is it's pretty well kept west-northwest track throughout its lifespan ever since it developed there in the eastern Atlantic. And there are the latest coordinates at 20.7 north, 76.0 west, 445 miles to the southeast of Miami, Florida. Sustained winds of 75 miles per hour, and it's moving to the west-northwest at 12. The estimated central pressure at 992 millibars. We do have hurricane advisories in effect, hurricane watches, and hurricane warnings. A reminder that if you're just tuning in since the last few hours, you'll want to know that the hurricane warnings have been dropped for the southeastern Bahamas. They have been dropped also for the Turks and Caicos, but you can see that they remain in effect for the central Bahamas, and also hurricane watches are in effect there into southern Florida, and that would include counties like Monroe, Dade, Broward, and Collier counties as well. And just to clarify the difference between hurricane watches and warnings, a reminder that hurricane watch means that conditions are possible in the watch area within the next 36 hours. We do think there's a very strong possibility that those hurricane watches into South Florida may be upgraded to hurricane warnings as we go on into Thursday morning. So if you're tuning out and heading to bed, that's the first thing you want to check on in the morning. Hurricane warnings mean that conditions are expected in the warning area 24 hours or less. And in the case of areas like Cuba, it's happening right now into western Cuba. Let's go ahead and show you that folks are indeed getting prepared for this. In fact, thousands of folks have been ordered to evacuate the Florida Keys on Wednesday. South Florida is under a hurricane watch, and the governor has declared a state of emergency in central and southern Florida. That allows the state to use the National Guard, lift tolls along the evacuation routes, and purchase emergency supplies. Residents spent Wednesday stocking up on supplies and boarding up their homes. And we wanted to show you some of the tragic details here now as we take you a little bit further back in the path of George into the Dominican Republic, for instance. At least 70 people have been killed and hundreds are missing. Heavy wind damage and flooding has been reported in Santo Domingo. And preliminary reports now out of Haiti show that 27 people died as a result of Hurricane George. There is flooding throughout Port-au-Prince, and many homes have received roof damage. And joining me now is our meteorology supervisor, Stu Ostro. A lot to talk about here as we talk about George. And I guess when we're talking to people about being prepared, something they may not think about, it's a little dark now to head out and board up the windows if you haven't done that yet. You've got time on Thursday into southern Florida. But little things like protecting your valuables. Now's the time to put maybe the photo albums in waterproof containers, something like that, something you can do indoors to be prepared. We'll talk more about the preparedness. You're here to give us a little insight on what's been happening for the past several hours with George.
Although, to follow up on what you said, that is one of those details that people might not remember, and that is to take your valuables and put them, for example, in a plastic bag that's waterproof. But really the bottom line with that is that when we get into the morning hours, we might have hurricane watches that have been changed to hurricane warnings, and at that point people will need to follow the instructions of the emergency management officials, which in some cases might be to pack up and evacuate, but might not. And those who do need to evacuate, if that order were to be issued, are the ones that need to do it, but don't if you're not ordered to evacuate.
Get everything ready tonight if you can.
Yeah, anybody who's still up, preparing, be ready to go just in case, and know your evacuation routes.
Okay, let's go ahead and take a peek at the satellite picture and we can get a better inspection. We want to remind folks too that this is actually, let's see if we can go to the other source. I think we have a brand new satellite pic on our AWG source, if we can go there. And we've just got one image because the eclipse has allowed us just this most recent image now.
Now, I'm not sure whether this is going to go into motion or not, but what it shows is that there's been this big blow-up of squalls east of the center, We'll have to digest this new photo since it's been a couple hours since we've gotten one each night. This time of year there's an eclipse. The Earth passes between the sun and the satellite and gets its power from the sun. So we'll have to digest this, but we do think the center of circulation is still wobbling over somewhere in here. The storm is somewhat asymmetric, but we do see this tremendous blow-up of squalls, and underneath that, undoubtedly, we have torrential rains, the potential for flash flooding and mudslides, also hurricane-force winds and storm surge.
Okay, and I was noticing too that as we head up toward Andros Island, at least on the radar, some of the moisture beginning to reach up here with some of these outer bands, maybe a little bit of rain. We've already talked about some squally weather in and around portions of the Bahamas. When do you think folks here watching from southern Florida might expect to see some changeable weather?
The weather will remain very nice for the next few hours, just a few of these high clouds coming in here. It's underneath these clouds where we have the outermost squalls, although it looks like those might have weakened a little bit over the last few hours. In general, the hurricane has perhaps become a little more disorganized, which is good news. It looks like any intensification is not going to happen right away. Timing-wise, as far as these outer squalls, sometime later Thursday on into Thursday night.
Okay, let's go ahead and talk about the projected path here then. And again, we have to remind people that there's always a certain degree of uncertainty. But what we've done here is given folks the projected path with the margin of error also included. And it definitely looks like folks in South Florida really need to be concerned about this to some capacity.
The track that we've been showing, which goes back about a week, comes all the way in here over Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, into here. And in general, even though we've seen a couple of wobbles along the way, it's maintained that steady path. We think that will continue for the most part in the short term. Eventually it's going to make a bit of a turn, but there is some question about that and some margin of error in any hurricane track forecast. Thus this cone that we've drawn, even if the hurricane were to end up being a Category 1 or best case scenario, it even weakens from that. That doesn't mean that people should take it lightly. It's better to prepare for what might happen and might be a little worse than to let your guard down.
And there's some certainty with the path because we know that there's a steering of an upper level or area of high pressure and also an area of low pressure to the southwest of this, and it's sort of feeding in between those two, and so we can be somewhat certain of that west-northwest path continuing at least for a time. We, of course, as we get more satellite images and we're able to loop that, we'll get a better idea for how close that center of circulation is toward the coast. And again, should that get out over warm open water, we may be talking about perhaps a rapidly intensifying hurricane?
At some point, given its disorganization right now, it does not appear as a kind of situation where the minute it gets over